And we're off. Hi, gang. Welcome. Episode 603 for this Wednesday evening, actually. Yeah, Wednesday evening. Uh, it's the night before Thanksgiving. Before I go anywhere, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Enjoy your Thursday off. Wanted to do a quick update here before we get into the holiday. Dolphins obviously not playing this Thanksgiving after playing last year against the Green Bay Packers, their first ever Thanksgiving night game, I should say, at Lambeau Field against the Packers. Fell behind 27-3 midway through the third quarter. Mounted a solid comeback. Fell short 30-17. Big sequence. Dolphins had a second and goal from the Green Bay 1 yard line at one point, and turned the ball over on downs, and then proceeded to lose. Overall, Dolphins are 5-3 on Thanksgiving, which is a pretty solid record. For those looking ahead, the Dolphins are scheduled to play the Detroit Lions, who traditionally host one of the two Thanksgiving afternoon games in 2026, but that game will be at Hard Rock Stadium. The Dolphins are scheduled to play the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas in 2027, assuming again that the scheduling formula remains the same. So that could be a possibility for the Dolphins returning to Thanksgiving. Another primetime game also might be a possibility, although given that the NFL generally would be looking for teams projected to have success and the Dolphins are going through a tough year, or looking for divisional rivalries like we have this year, Cincinnati at Baltimore. Not sure that I wouldn't count on it, particularly considering the fact the Dolphins did play on Thursday night on Thanksgiving last year. So best guess would be possibility of 2027 Miami at Dallas on Thanksgiving, but who knows? For this week, it's New Orleans at Miami on Sunday, a game where the Dolphins are favored to win. They clearly should win, and if they don't, we're back to, instead of asking the questions, however silly it might seem to certain Dolphin fans, whether they can make a run or any kind of playoff push, the question then would become, how badly does this thing need to be blown up? Does it need to be blown up to smithereens and basically start all over again with everybody? That's just how significant a loss against New Orleans might be. It's one of those games that's tough for the Dolphins because the potential consequences of a loss are more significant than the fruits of a victory, because it would to be expected, and it would only get them to 5-7. Still a ways to go. They are 11th in the AFC standings as it stands right now. That means they have to jump 4 teams, and this is where you can start looking at those remaining schedules for every team, and which team do you figure might be the most vulnerable, easiest to pass among those teams ahead of them. And Pittsburgh's one team that clearly jumps out as being vulnerable, as a team the Dolphins could jump ahead of because of the remaining schedule, which includes the Buffalo Bills at home on Sunday, at Baltimore the following week. Then they have the Dolphins at home, and the Dolphins can take care of that business. That's another win, another loss for Pittsburgh. And then the Steelers also have in their final 3 games a game at Detroit and their season finale against the Baltimore Ravens. So, but the Dolphins have to take care of their own business. Otherwise, none of this matters. And again, we'll be talking about what the offseason is going to look like and how ugly it might get in terms of the volume of changes we could be seeing with those Miami Dolphins. For now, there was a change on the roster on Wednesday. The Dolphins signing from their own practice squad this time, as opposed to signing from somebody else's practice squad. Today, it was signing linebacker Caleb Johnson. Although when I say linebacker, it's more accurate to say they signed special teams specialist Caleb Johnson to fill the roster void that had been created over the weekend when the Dolphins placed fellow linebacker, even though he's listed on the roster as a safety, Jordan Colbert, who also was a special team standout. This move was strictly about special teams. Why do I say that? Look at Caleb Johnson's career resume. He has played 65 games in the NFL. Might be 62. Anyway, it's over 60. Somewhere between 60 and 65. I apologize for not having the exact number right now, but it's over 60 games. And he's gotten a lot of playing time, practically all of it on special teams. In fact, the last time he played on special teams, on defense, was when he was a rookie free agent with the Chicago Bears in the 2021 season, and he played a grand total of 5 defensive snaps. That is it as far as Caleb Johnson defense. Again, he's played every single game the last 3 years with the Jacksonville Jaguars. All of his work coming on special teams and a core special teams player, and it almost looks like an apples to apples replacement for Jordan Colbert, with Caleb Johnson basically filling that roster spot. It's an interesting move. The Dolphins could have gone a couple of different ways. They have 2 guys on the practice squad who remain on the practice squad despite the fact they've used up their 3 practice squad elevations. That being Quentin Bell, who was on the active roster all of 2024, and cornerback Isaiah Johnson, who was a good-looking rookie free agent in 2024, didn't make the team, spent a lot of time in the practice squad, came back this year, kind of the same deal. If memory serves, he made the initial 53-man roster only to be cut right away when the Dolphins claimed Juju Brents off waivers from Indianapolis, as memory serves, and then he's been on the practice squad ever since. He's another one of those cornerbacks who's very long. He's like 6'3", and does have some potential. Again, not enough potential for the Dolphins to have signed him to the 53-man roster. So this roster move of Caleb Johnson is strictly about special teams. It's an area where the Dolphins clearly have made a more significant emphasis in 2025 after really struggling on special teams the past previous seasons under coordinator Danny Crossman, who was replaced this offseason by Craig Aukerman. And the Dolphins have done a really good job, particularly when it comes to the punting game. They are in the top 5 in both punt return average, thanks in large part to the work of Malik Washington. They're also in the top 5 in punt return average allowed, thanks to the good work of Jake Bailey, as well as the coverage units. Jake Bailey right now is second in the NFL in net punting average, having himself a very, very good season and justifying every week the Dolphins' decision to keep him instead of free agent Ryan Stonehouse, who they signed after he set a couple of NFL records for highest gross punting average in a season during time with the Tennessee Titans. To take Caleb Johnson's spot on the practice squad, the Dolphins signed, as was reported on Tuesday, Jimmy Charlo, formerly of the Buffalo Bills during training camp. He is a former Army player, got himself some FaceTime during Hard Knocks with the Buffalo Bills. But he will take a spot on the practice squad. Now, the Dolphins also, while it has yet to be announced, the transactions, the NFL transactions, as I'm recording this, have not come out yet. This is not something the Dolphins would announce, but Darren Waller is on the injury report for Wednesday, the first injury report of the week against New Orleans, which means he's been designated to return, which means his 21-day window to come off IR has been activated. Austin Jackson as well. He's now in his 3rd week of practice after being designated to return. The bye week counts. This is the last week for Austin Jackson in terms of work, which means that by this time next week, by next Tuesday, the Dolphins will have had to make a decision on his status for the remainder of 2025, whether he's signed to the 53-man roster, whether he is kept on IR for the remainder of the season, or even though I don't see this happening, or whether the Dolphins just waive him. That's not going to happen. There's cap ramifications involved there, so that wouldn't happen. But and if the Dolphins do decide to activate him for the game against New Orleans, those moves likely will come on Saturday. Same with Darren Waller, although the Dolphins' pattern has been to let a player practice 2 weeks before he makes his return off IR. So I would not expect Darren Waller to be activated for New Orleans. More likely Austin Jackson, although that move wouldn't come again until Saturday. And at that time, the Dolphins would have to make a corresponding move to create an opening, because the signing of Caleb Johnson to the 53 now completes that list as well, which is why perhaps I'm a little hesitant to suggest it's clear-cut that Austin Jackson is coming off IR. Otherwise, why would the Dolphins not have waited until Saturday to fill the roster spot and just given it to Austin Jackson if you were going to come back for the game, and then you don't have to make any other moves, as opposed to a move that they're going to have to make now? The only reason that would preclude this, outside of uncertainty regarding the status of Austin Jackson, would be if the Dolphins got word, or if somebody was going to sign Caleb Johnson off their practice squad the way the Dolphins did with Andrew Carter II, who they signed off the Detroit Lions practice squad a few weeks back, and Andre Carter II still has yet to make his Dolphin debut. Dolphins did the same thing as well with Cedric Wilson Jr. when they signed him off the New Orleans Saints practice squad a while back after Tyreek Hill was placed on injured reserve. Hill has gone into some games not producing very big numbers, and in fact, if you check out the written content at Miami Dolphins on SI.com, all for free, and I certainly hope you do so. We have a story on the issues the Dolphins have had in terms of wide receiver 2 since Tyreek Hill has been injured. The numbers are completely startling and crazy. And Cedric Wilson Jr. is one of those guys who have yet to step up with major production during that time, along with Malik Washington, Taj Washington, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, and D. Eskridge. Really, Dolphins have not gotten any sort of contributions of any significance from any of those guys since Tyreek Hill has gone down with that knee injury. And the Dolphins have made a dramatic shift in terms of offensive philosophy since that time toward a heavier emphasis on the running game. And while it's worked great against Atlanta, against Buffalo, and against Washington, there are certain drawbacks. Namely, if the Dolphins fall behind, they're in a more difficult situation than they were when they had Tyreek Hill. The other issue as well is they have really not been that good on third down for the past month or so, and the numbers clearly dipped once Tyreek Hill went on injured reserve with that knee injury. You may have seen this. I haven't addressed it yet this week, but Drew Rosenhaus, during his weekly hit on the South Florida television station WSVN, said that Tyreek Hill is doing fine in his rehab, progressing very well. Has not had discussions with the Dolphins about the 2026 season remaining with the team. Those will be had after the season. Again, he said exactly what you would expect an agent to say, even if his recovery was going terribly. The odds that his agent would say that on television are microscopic. That's just not how the game is played. So I have with me here the full injury report for Wednesday, the first injury report of the week for the game against New Orleans. Remember, there was no injury report on Monday because it's before the time, even though Dolphins did have a normal practice because they were coming off their bye. And during that day, we did not see during the portion open to the media either Bradley Chubb or Jalen Waddle. And it turns out both of them are dealing with a foot injury. Both of them were listed as limited participants in practice on Wednesday. The good news here on the injury report is that there's not one single player on the Dolphins 53-man roster who missed practice. Everybody practiced. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 7 players, however, who were listed as limited, including 2 who are still on IR. Austin Jackson with the toe injury, Darren Waller with the pectoral injury. The other 3, besides Chubb and Waddle, were center Aaron Brewer, dealing with foot and ankle injuries, cornerback Rasul Douglas, who's missed the past 2 games with foot and ankle injuries as well, and defensive tackle Benito Jones, dealing with an ankle injury. The Dolphins really do need Rasul Douglas for this game now that Juju Brents is on IR because of the injury he sustained in the game against the Washington Commanders. Washington Commanders. Yes, it was against the Washington Commanders. Dolphins had 3 other players listed as full participants. Wide receiver D. Eskridge with a shoulder injury, linebacker Matthew Judon knee, safety Fatu Melifonwu with the thumb injury. The Saints had only 4 players on their injury report, but that group was headed by running back Alvin Kamara, who did not practice. He's got knee and ankle injuries, and barring a dramatic turn of events, likely will not play against the Dolphins, which clearly will help the Dolphins' defensive cause. The Saints had 3 other players listed as limited. Tackle Talyesi Fuaga, ankle. Running back Devin Neal, ankle. Wide receiver Chris Olave with a back injury. We'll know more. There will be, for those wondering, there will be an injury report produced on Thanksgiving, even though there is no Dolphin media availability. There will, quick early programming alert, there also will not be an All Dolphins podcast on Thursday. taking the day off. Everybody enjoy Thanksgiving. Everybody take the day off. Again, this is a game the Dolphins absolutely, positively have to win. This is not a good team they're facing. And I understand, yes, no, the Dolphins are not a good team either. But they were expected to be a lot better than New Orleans. New Orleans was expected to be a poor team. They were paying the price for all of those years of kicking the can down the road with their salary cap issues. It's a depleted roster. They do have some big name players on defense. Cam Jordan's a very good defensive lineman. Linebacker Demario Davis, a good player. Mike McDaniel in his pre-practice press conference on Wednesday would not stop raving about the dude. But overall, it's still a pretty mediocre roster right now, probably more so on offense, especially if they don't have Alvin Kamara. They have gotten rid of 2 of their 3 good wide receivers. Brandon Cooks was released over the weekend. He is now signed with the Buffalo Bills. And then they traded Rashid Shaheed to the Seattle Seahawks at the trade deadline, with leaving them with Chris Olave. They also have a rookie at quarterback in Tyler Shuck, who replaced second-year player Spencer Rattler. Also, before we leave, we should also point out that the NFL announced, or 2 different things in terms of awards. The NFL announced its list of each team's nominee for the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award for the Dolphins. It's defensive lineman Zach Sealer. And as you can tell by the title, basically it's an award that recognizes players who play the game the right way. Of course, this is where we could point out that he had a roughing the punter penalty against Buffalo. That wasn't very sportsmanlike, but obviously that was kind of a fluky thing where he went for the punt or the push. Actually wound up doing his job too well. And even looking at the replay, not so sure that Bills long snapper Reed Ferguson, the older brother of former Dolphin long snapper Blake Ferguson, didn't get his feet up in Sealer's chest and produce even more momentum for Sealer going toward the punter on that very costly roughing the punter penalty back in week 3. But I digress. So Zach Sealer's a Dolphins nominee. The award's about 10 years old. The Dolphins never have had a winner of that award, which is nice. And also this week, the Pro Football Hall of Fame committee announced a list of the 26 semifinalists for the 2026 class. And it includes 2 former Dolphins, Frank Gore, although he played 1 season with the Dolphins among his 20 or so NFL seasons, all of which consistent. That dude was like, man, count on him playing every single solitary game and always productive. And then the other one, Richmond Webb, a semifinalist for the 2nd consecutive year. Again, I analyzed his situation at MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com. Please check it out. The written content, all for free. The big story here with Richmond Webb, going to be very honest here, the chances of him getting elected in 2026, probably not very good. There are, can't remember the exact number, maybe 9 of the semifinalists, or pardon me, of the 26 semifinalists were finalists last year. Richmond wasn't one of them. It's going to be between 5 and 8 total members elected to the class of 2026. There are a couple of first-time eligibles who seem like pretty good bets to get in, that Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald. So the chances again for Richmond Webb, if we're going to be honest, not great this year. The key name to watch, as I wrote on the website, so you would already know this if you check out the free content, is Willie Anderson. Why Willie Anderson? Because Willie Anderson was a finalist last year. He's an offensive tackle just like Richmond Webb. His career pretty similar to that of Richmond Webb. Could be argued that Richmond Webb actually was a better player than Willie Anderson. They're kind of similar in terms of accolades. I believe the final tally was 4 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pro teams for Willie Anderson, 5 Pro Bowls, 5 All-Pro teams. Pardon me, 4 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pro teams, 7 Pro Bowls for Richmond Webb. Both played 13 seasons. Ironically, if you recall, if you're an older Dolphin fan, you recall this, Richmond Webb played 11 seasons with the Dolphins, 1990 through 2000, then spent his final 2 seasons with the Cincinnati Bengals, where one of his teammates, he started left tackle, one of his teammates was, you guessed it, Willie Anderson. So the fact that Willie Anderson was a finalist last year ahead of Richmond Webb would suggest that in the eyes of the voters, who generally don't change much from year to year, Anderson might be slightly ahead of Richmond Webb and would be the one blocking his path to the Hall of Fame. Where maybe, because Willie Anderson is the only other tackle among the semifinalists. Once Anderson is out of the way, that puts maybe Richmond at the top of the list among offensive tackles until first-time eligibles who were deemed or had better careers than Richmond maybe move ahead of him, or for the time being, it puts him at the top of that list. So this is why, if you're a Dolphins fan, you root for Richmond Webb to get in this year, or at the very least make the list of 15 finalists, which will be announced, I believe, in about a month or in a few weeks. Then you're rooting for Frank Gore to get in because he spent a year with the Dolphins. And then you're rooting for Willie Anderson to get in because that is ease the path, facilitate the way for Richmond Webb to eventually get in. So we shall see when the list of finalists is released again. It's in a few weeks. Hopefully Richmond makes the next cut, but at the very least, it's good that he's made it to the semifinal round for a second consecutive year. So on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Again, No All Dolphins podcast on Thursday, Thanksgiving. Everyone enjoy your Thanksgiving. Eat and drink responsibly. Actually, do whatever you want. We'll be back here on Friday. We will also on Friday, this is going to be a new time. Friday morning at 9 a.m. There's going to be Dolphins Collective previewing the game against the Saints. Check out the written content, please, at MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com. All the content is free. And please like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And wherever you get your audio podcasts, you can find the All Dolphins podcast, Google, Spotify, Apple, wherever. So once again, happy Thanksgiving.